Something big is brewing in San Francisco as Buster Posey fires Bob Melvin and is searching for his next manager to head the San Francisco Giants. In this one, we're going to talk about all of the potential candidates, and then I'm going to point out my favorites and who I would want to see at the helm of the San Francisco Giants in 2026 and beyond. Welcome back to SF Giants Digest, and before we get started, let me know down in the comments who you would want to be running the San Francisco Giants heading into 2026, who you want calling the shots, making the lineups, going to the bullpen. Let me know who you would like to see at the head of the San Francisco Giants. And then let's get right into the discussion. First of all, I can't go without shouting out Skip Schumacher, who would have undoubtedly been the front runner for this job, but there was an opening in Texas as Bruce Bochy was let go or mutually decided to part ways, I think is the terminology that the Rangers used. And really shortly after, Skip Schumacher was named the manager, as he was almost the manager in waiting in Texas. He was the NL Manager of the Year back in 2023 with the Marlins, and then got pushed out of there for some reason. We all know the Marlins are one of the weirdest organizations in baseball, but he was the most sought-after manager candidate across baseball this offseason, but really quickly he is named the manager for the Texas Rangers. And as I just mentioned, Bruce Bochy was another guy that was open to managing for another year or so. And obviously a lot of Giants fans were saying, let's have the reunion. Let's bring back Bruce Bochy, a three-time World Series winner with the ball club, Buster Posey's manager when they won World Series. But that was really quickly shut down by Buster Posey. As Susan Slusser reported a couple days ago, Posey says there is always a role here for Bochy, but doesn't see the team hiring him as a manager. And I really liked that Posey shut this down really quickly. I personally was not a fan of the possibility of bringing Bruce Bochy back. I think the organization needs to go in a completely different direction. Bob Melvin was basically the closest thing you could have gotten to Bruce Bochy when you hired him 2 years ago. Just an old school type of manager who's going to trust the guys he has in the game for the most part. A little bit of platooning, but not super analytically focused. And like I said, that's the closest thing you would have gotten to Bochy back then. So it didn't make a lot of sense to just go back to what was basically being done the last 2 years, heading into 2026. So I do like that Posey is not going to be hiring Bochy as a manager, but I would love to have him in the front office as an advisor of some sort. Obviously, he has a lot of history with the Giants, and his Hall of Fame clock can get started as in 5 years he will undoubtedly be named into the Hall of Fame as a manager. Now next, I'm going to be talking about the three guys that I would personally like to see get the job. I think these are three of some of the front runners, but these are the three guys personally that I think do have a really good chance of getting the job, and I think would do a good job as the manager of the San Francisco Giants. The first one, who I do believe is the head front runner, is Nick Hundley. This is what Alex Pavlovich of NBC Sports Bay Area had to say about him. He says the 42-year-old is a fit in a lot of ways, and Posey is said to be intrigued. Hundley is a former catcher and former Giant, having served as Posey's backup. In retirement, he first worked for MLB and now serves as a senior advisor for the Texas Rangers Operations Department. In that role, Hundley won a World Series and got an up-close look at the work done by Bruce Bochy. And then he goes on, while Hundley has no coaching experience, he certainly brings the type of personality that would be a breath of fresh air for a team that continues to go into second-half slides. A former Willie Mack Award winner, he has plenty of fans here and traveled to San Francisco last week to watch Willy Adames get the award. I think this shows that Nick Hundley has a lot of ties within the Giants organization, and something that's not mentioned here that I think is really interesting is the Giants really wanted to interview Nick Hundley back in 2023 after firing Gabe Kapler and before bringing in Bob Melvin. Nick Hundley was a guy that the organization was very much interested in bringing in as the next manager, but at that time, I'm not sure why Hundley was not interested in managing. I don't know if he had young kids or he was just really enjoying his role with MLB or the Rangers. But for some reason, he did not have interest in the role. And so it would make a lot of sense that, 2 years later, Hundley has some interest in managing, and the Giants, I'm sure, are still going to be very interested in bringing him in as the next manager of the San Francisco Giants. Obviously, it seems like Posey is leaning towards a former catcher to be the next manager, just a little bit younger than Bob Melvin, obviously. Next is the guy I would really love to see. He's probably my favorite candidate, and it's a very unorthodox one. It is Tony Vitello from the University of Tennessee. Alex Pavlovich says, first mentioned as a possibility by The Athletic, Vitello has long been on the radar of some in the front office, per a source. The Giants have also loaded up on former Tennessee stars over the past year, Drew Gilbert, Blade Tidwell, and they just drafted the shortstop Gavin Keelan with their first-round pick just this past year. And then he goes on to say the 46-year-old would be a surprising choice, but there's no denying his credentials at the collegiate level. The Volunteers have made 3 College World Series appearances in the last 5 seasons and have won 72% of the games under Vitello. 72% is a lot better than the 500 or below baseball we've seen since 2017, outside of 2021, of course. But obviously, college baseball and Major League Baseball are 2 completely different animals, and it would be an adjustment for him. But I think bringing in a young guy who knows what it takes to win could be a really good choice. Obviously, Vitello has experience of winning baseball, going to the College World Series 3 times, winning the College World Series, I believe 2 seasons ago with the Volunteers. And there's some familiar faces for him here. Drew Gilbert, who he coached on one of the best college teams in the history of college baseball a couple years ago, Blade Tidwell, and then obviously Gavin Keelan, who the Giants just drafted. So I think this would be a really intriguing choice. And I think last week, right after the news of Melvin being fired came out, Alex Pavlovich said that this next manager should have a better relationship with fans. The last 2, obviously Bob Melvin was not necessarily loved by the majority of Giants fans, and then Gabe Kapler was not a big, didn't do a lot of interviews, didn't interact with fans a ton. So it would make sense that this next guy could be someone that, draws a little closer to the fans and brings in more of a pull from the fans. And Vitello would be exactly that. There's a lot of clips of him, celebrating with the Volunteer fans after winning the College World Series or after advancing in a round of playoffs. So a younger guy like this, I think, could match that. Now, next, I do have to point out that Kurt Suzuki did actually just interview with the Giants yesterday. As reported by Susan Slusser, obviously it says Kurt Suzuki is reportedly interviewing for the Giants manager position today, and this was yesterday. According to Susan Slusser, as I just mentioned, she does a lot of good work for the Chronicle, and you trust everything she says as she's tapped into the clubhouse very closely. And Suzuki's obviously a catcher, a big theme here with Buster Posey's candidates, it seems like, and I believe he's in the front office with the Angels currently. I could be wrong, but a guy that played with the Angels, played with the A's for a long time, the Nationals, a couple of other teams. But so he is familiar with the Bay Area after playing with the A's, but there isn't a ton of ties with him and the Giants that I could think of. And just something about this news doesn't excite me a ton, especially as some of the other ones we've mentioned. But I do think it is an important thing to point out that he did just interview for the job. Now, the last guy that I think is going to be a heavy favorite and I would love to see get the job is Craig Albernaz. He was a guy who was on the staff before Bob Melvin came in. And Alex Pavlovich says, after letting Melvin go, Posey said he wanted someone who was obsessive about the details, the daily work that's required, and getting the most out of players. And that really does sound like Gabe Kapler's staff from 2020 to 2023 or whatever it was. They were always, super analytically focused, diving into the deep numbers, a lot of platoons, a lot of things like that, helping guys out every single day. And Pavlovich has said that coaches were staying in hotels just because of how often they were at the field working with players. He goes on to say, Albernaz was Posey's catching coach in 2021 and is extremely close with Patrick Bailey. Albernaz has spent the past 2 seasons in Cleveland as Stephen Vogt's associate manager. Now, you see a mention of Stephen Vogt here, who I'm sure the Giants wish they would have hired back in 2023 when they had the manager open prior to this season. He's obviously done a lot of really good things with the Guardians, just recently leading them into one of the best playoff pushes we've ever seen the last month or so, gaining, I think it was like 18 games on the Tigers to end up winning the division. So Albernaz knows what it takes to win, obviously, just recently proving it, and he's gotten to see how Stephen Vogt operates as the manager, and he could take a lot of what he learned there into the Giants clubhouse, which I think could be really, really encouraging. Now, 2 other candidates that I do want to mention, the first one being Mark DeRosa. I don't love this idea, but he is a guy who has a lot of ties to the Giants. He played with the Giants for 2 years, and he does actually have some managing experience as opposed to some of the other guys we've mentioned that don't. He did coach Team USA in the World Baseball Classic just 2 years ago, I believe it was. So he does have a little bit of experience, and Team USA obviously did well, but it would be pretty hard to not do well with the team that they had that was absolutely loaded. Obviously, Mike Trout, all of these big names playing for Team USA. So it was pretty hard to mess up as the manager there. But he does have some managerial experience. He's currently doing TV with MLB Network, so he's all around baseball. But I do think he will be a popular name around Major League Baseball during this offseason for every team that needs a new manager at the helm. Lastly, I want to point out Ron Modus, who was a bench coach with the Giants for a long time. He is currently doing some pregame, postgame stuff with NBC Sports Bay Area for the Giants. But he was in the dugout with Bochy. He obviously knows what it takes to win a World Series, but he is kind of the same mold as Bruce Bochy, as Bob Melvin, where I do think this is a less likely candidate just because it seems like Buster Posey wants to go in a younger, more analytically driven, focused candidate. But I do think Ron Wotus could get an interview. I think his name will definitely be floated throughout talks over the next couple of weeks. And I just think that he deserves an interview at this point with how much he's done with the Giants, since 2010, since winning those World Series and everything around there. Now, that is going to conclude this video. Those are the candidates that I do think have the best chance of possibly getting the job. And as I mentioned, my three favorites would be, Craig Albernaz, Nick Hundley, and then my top pick would be Tony Vitello, even though it is a very high-risk, high-reward candidate, a riskier pick, a guy that has no Major League experience whatsoever coaching at the college level. But I do think those are the three guys that will be kind of the favorites in the talks over the next couple of weeks, as names are going to be continuously floated across Major League Baseball as who could be the Giants manager. There are a lot of reporters saying that this job is seen as desirable. Obviously, you have talent like Willy Adames, Rafael Devers, Matt Chapman, big name guys who you'd be able to coach and use every single day. Logan Webb at the top of your rotation, Robbie Ray, and then some young talent too, Casey Schmidt, Elliot Ramos, Patrick Bailey, even a Jung Hoo Lee. So this is a big job, and Buster Posey has shown that he can get the front office to spend. So a manager that has a front office that will back him trying to win, and some stars that he'll be able to put into his lineup every day. I do think this is a desirable job, and as Robert Murray reported, Buster Posey is seen as a good executive at this point. Even though it's only been a year since he's been named the president of baseball operations, it seems like he's a good guy that people like to work for and is going to go try and win every single day, make the move, make the big decision. So it is going to be interesting to see who the Giants select as their next manager. Make sure before you end the video to go down below and hit subscribe to SF Giants Digest as we get the channel going. That would be much appreciated. And always go Giants, and thanks for watching.